I didn't steal anything. This is my money. 13-year-old Jayden Bennett trembled at the customer service desk, his voice choking with anger as he tried to explain. But the bank manager, Karen Mitchell, looked at the black boy with nothing but contempt. A kid like you and you've got this much cash? I don't buy it. You must have stolen it from somebody, Karen said, her tone dripping with prejudice. Tears welled in Jayden's eyes as humiliation washed over him. It was supposed to be simple. He just wanted to open his very first bank account. Please, let me call my dad, Jayden begged. Karen sneered. Go ahead and tell the cops your sob story. I'm not buying it. Without hesitation, she picked up the phone and dialed. I need the police at once. There's a thief trying to deposit stolen money into our bank. What Karen Mitchell didn't realize was that she'd just made the biggest mistake of her career, because in less than an hour, she would learn exactly who Jayden's father was, and when that happened, her entire world would collapse. What followed not only exposed Karen's shocking racism, but also revealed a powerful secret that would change everything. That bright, sunlit Tuesday afternoon, 13-year-old Jayden Miller stepped off the bus in front of the First National Bank, excitement shining on his face. He took a deep breath to steady his nerves. This wasn't just any trip, it was the first milestone of his journey into adulthood, a moment he'd looked forward to for weeks. In his small backpack, alongside a neatly organized binder, was an envelope containing $800, a heartfelt birthday gift from his grandmother. In the days leading up to this, Jayden had thoroughly researched how to open a bank account online, practiced speaking confidently, and gathered every required document. To him, this wasn't merely depositing money. It was proof to his dad that he was responsible enough to manage his own finances. When the automatic glass doors slid open, Jayden walked into the spacious, elegant lobby with pride swelling in his chest. The bank was fairly busy, but he held his head high and made his way to the teller window with a bright smile. But as soon as he reached the counter, his joy evaporated. The teller, Lisa Edwards, who had just been smiling at the previous customer, instantly hardened when she saw Jayden. Her smile vanished, replaced by a cold, suspicious glare. Lisa's eyes roamed over him, head to toe, with blatant distrust. Before Jayden could speak, she snapped with clear disdain. "What do you want?" Despite feeling deflated and confused by her attitude, Jayden kept his composure. He forced a polite smile and said, "Hi, ma'am. I'd like to open my first bank account today. I have all my paperwork and the cash right here." He placed the envelope and his documents on the counter. But Lisa didn't glance at his papers. Her gaze remained fixed on the cash. She narrowed her eyes, curled her lip in a cruel smirk, and asked flatly, "A kid like you with this much cash, where'd you get it?" Jayden hesitated, taken aback, but tried to explain honestly, "It's a birthday gift from my grandmother, and part of it is my own savings. I really prepared for this day." Lisa laughed mockingly and cut him off. "A birthday gift? How cute! You think we're that gullible? I know exactly where kids like you get their money." Every word from Lisa felt like a knife to Jayden's pride. He looked pale and bewildered, unable to understand why she treated him this way. I don't understand. I really haven't done anything wrong," Jayden stammered, his voice trembling and eyes glistening with hurt. "Nothing wrong?" Lisa raised her voice, drawing the attention of others nearby. "With that much cash, there's no way it's clean. Just wait for my manager. She'll know how to handle you." Jayden stood frozen, his hands clutching his backpack straps so tightly they shook, trying to hold back the shame and shock flooding his chest. What should have been the happiest day of his young life had turned into a nightmare he never saw coming. The cold words from Lisa rang out sharply in the bank's hushed interior, drawing every curious gaze toward Jayden. A wave of shame and fear rose in his chest, an invisible weight pressing down on his small shoulders. Jayden took a deep, shaky breath, his hand trembling as he unzipped his backpack and pulled out the papers he'd prepared. "Please, look at these documents," Jayden said, his voice quivering but earnest. "I have my birth certificate, my student ID, and a letter from my dad. I really just want to open an account." He looked at Lisa with pleading eyes, hoping she'd understand and stop this bizarre behavior. But instead of accepting his honest explanation, Lisa Edwards grew even more aggressive. Her eyes glittered with contempt, as if she were certain Jayden couldn't possibly be telling the truth. "Letters and papers can be faked just as easily," she snapped. "I know kids like you all too well. Tell me the truth. Where did you steal this money from? Or were you peddling some street drugs? If you come clean now, I might go easy on you." Jayden froze, his face turning icy at the harsh, baseless accusations. It was the first time in his life he'd ever faced such vicious, cruel words. A tsunami of emotions, anger, confusion, humiliation, crashed over him. Tears welled in the corners of his eyes, but Jayden forced himself to stay calm. "I've never done anything like that. My dad taught me to always be honest and work hard. I just don't understand why you won't believe me," he stammered. Lisa sneered and cut him off. "Honest? Hardworking? Those words sound ridiculous coming from you. Look at you, so young, Black, showing up with stacks of cash, insisting you're here to open an account. Do you think I was born yesterday?" Every one of Lisa's poisonous remarks was a blade stabbing into Jayden's pride. His confidence shattered. With trembling hands, he set his papers on the counter, voice choked with despair. "Please, just call my dad. He'll explain everything." Lisa stared at him with an icy glare, then shook her head curtly. "I don't want to hear another lie from you. It's time for my manager to handle this." Before Jayden could react, Lisa grabbed the phone and punched in an extension, her tone tense but triumphant. "Karen, please come down here right away. I've got a special case for you. Looks like some kid is trying to open an account with suspicious cash." She clicked the receiver down and gave Jayden a victorious glance. Jayden was now in full panic, standing motionless as tears streamed down his cheeks, unable to believe his big day had turned into such a disaster. At the end of the hallway, the office door swung open, and the sharp click of high heels echoed as a powerful woman strode toward the teller line. From the crowd emerged Karen Mitchell, First National Bank's senior manager, known for her ironclad control and hard-nosed attitude, but also for the deep prejudice no one dared to challenge. Karen locked eyes on Jayden with a stern expression. Without waiting for an explanation, she asked Lisa in a decisive, skeptical tone, "What's the problem here, Lisa?" Lisa stepped forward, her gaze flicking triumphantly to Jayden before answering. "This boy has $800 in cash and insists it's a birthday gift. I suspect it's from illegal sources. When I pressed him, he got evasive and showed signs of losing his cool. I thought you should handle it yourself." Karen narrowed her eyes as she studied Jayden, then leaned in and said just loudly enough for him to hear, "This kid is definitely a problem. I'll get to the bottom of this myself." Jayden stood there, utterly alone and helpless, unaware that his nightmare was only just beginning. From the moment Karen Mitchell appeared, the tension at the teller line turned icy. Her decisive footsteps echoed across the glossy white tile, the authoritative click of her high heels parting the crowd as customers instinctively stepped aside. For Karen, handling situations like this had become second nature after more than 20 years climbing the ranks in banking, but today her demeanor was sharper and more severe than usual. Karen's steely gaze swept over Jayden, then snapped to Lisa, her voice carrying both authority and impatience. "I hear this boy is carrying a suspicious amount of cash?" Lisa nodded quickly, her tone obsequious. "Yes, ma'am. He insists it's a birthday gift and his savings, but I can see his hesitation. I suspect it's illicit money, so I asked you to handle it directly." Without letting Lisa finish, Karen turned her full attention back to Jayden, her look dripping with contempt. Deep-seated prejudices, long buried, surged to the surface, sharpening the bias she'd hidden behind a professional smile. In Karen's mind, any unaccompanied child of color showing up with a large sum could only mean one thing: wrongdoing. She was convinced Jayden was a troublemaker attempting some amateur fraud. "Boy, exactly where did you get this money?" Karen demanded, her tone devoid of compassion. "You'd better be honest. I don't have time to waste." Jayden, still trembling under the glare, wiped tears from his cheeks. He took a shaky breath, voice cracking but determined. "Ma'am, I swear this money is legal. It's a birthday gift from my grandmother plus my own savings from helping my dad at home. I have all the documents to prove it." He extended his meticulously prepared papers once more, hoping Karen would see reason, but she didn't even glance at them. Instead, she shook her head and laughed coldly, as if hearing the punchline of a bad joke. "I don't have time for a child's fairy tale. Birthday gift? Savings? I've seen plenty of kids like you. Don't bother with the act, it won't work." Karen turned back to Lisa, irritation in her eyes. "Next time, don't bother me over trivial nonsense. Call the police right away. People like this aren't worth our time." Her words struck Jayden's pride like a dagger. Overcome with shame, he could barely stand. Desperate, he pleaded, "Please believe me. I'm not lying. If you don't trust me, let me call my dad. He'll explain everything." Karen's eyes narrowed in icy resolve. "No, I'm not giving you another chance to pull a stunt. I've heard enough lies. The police will uncover whatever you're hiding." Jayden's hand shook as he reached for his phone, but before he could dial, Karen snatched it away in one brusque motion. "I said no. You can't call anyone. This is a bank, not your playground." Her ruthless act made the air even more oppressive. Customers whispered anxiously, none daring to intervene. Some shook their heads at Karen's cruelty, but all remained silent. Karen ignored them. In her mind, only pride and unwavering faith in her own judgment counted, a blind trust in prejudices she'd nurtured for years. To her, calling the police on a boy like Jayden was simply routine. Jayden stood frozen, utterly helpless. His world had shattered in under half an hour. Every hope he'd placed in this milestone, every dream of proving himself, evaporated. Tears blurred his terrified face as Karen's heels clicked again, this time striding to the fixed phone at the counter. She lifted the receiver and spoke in her authoritative, cold tone. "Hello, this is First National Bank. We need the police here immediately. We have a black boy here with suspicious cash, possibly linked to illegal activity. Please respond as soon as possible." She ended the call, set the handset down, and shot Jayden a triumphant glance, as if she'd just won a great victory. What she didn't know was that this call would become the turning point that upended her entire life. The click of Karen's call had hardly ended before a suffocating hush fell over the entire bank lobby. Jayden stood frozen, hot tears slipping silently down his cheeks, his young heart crushed by a fear he'd never known. All his thoughts of excitement, maturity, pride, and responsibility, feelings he'd anticipated for days, shattered into confusion and utter despair. Minutes later, the bank doors burst open, and bright afternoon sunlight flooded in. 2 officers entered with steely expressions, their sharp eyes sweeping the room until they locked onto Jayden. Travis Walsh, a tall man with salt and pepper crew cut and chiseled features, and Amanda Cruz, a young, no-nonsense cop with her dark hair pulled into a tight bun, strode confidently forward. Their presence sent every customer backing away, forming a wide circle around Jayden, as if he were a dangerous criminal under siege. Karen hurried up to the officers, a look of satisfaction flickering across her face. In a firm, pointed tone, she recounted the situation, deliberately highlighting words that implied Jayden's guilt. "Officers, this boy arrived with a suspicious amount of cash and can't explain where it came from. I suspect it's proceeds from illegal activity. When questioned, he evaded and lost his composure." Travis and Amanda's eyes narrowed on Jayden without a hint of doubt. They didn't even glance at the legit documents Jayden still clutched in his hand. Travis stepped forward, his deep voice cutting through the silence. "Boy, turn around and place your hands behind your back immediately." Jayden startled, eyes wide with terror, scarcely believing what he'd heard. In utter desperation, he trembled as he pleaded through tears. "Sirs, I swear this money is mine. I haven't done anything wrong. My dad can prove it. Please let me call him, just one call, I beg you." But Travis remained unmoved, his face cold and resolute, treating Jayden like a hardened criminal instead of a scared child in need of help. Amanda stood silently beside him, emotionless. She calmly retrieved a pair of gleaming handcuffs. The click of metal echoed sharply in the oppressive quiet. Jayden's tears flowed freely now, his voice cracking with panic and anguish. "No, please don't do this. I'm innocent. I didn't do anything wrong. Please believe me, officers." His feeble explanations fell on deaf ears. Travis lunged forward, roughly spinning Jayden around, forcing his small, shaking hands behind his back, and snapping on the ice-cold cuffs. The harsh clang of metal rang out, amplifying the boy's humiliation and wrenching away any chance of resistance. Bank customers and staff had gathered in a tight crowd by now, pity, curiosity, and unease in their eyes. Yet no one dared step forward. They stood silently, witnessing the grave injustice, each privately believing something was horribly wrong, yet powerless to act. Karen watched beside Lisa with barely concealed triumph, as though she'd just claimed a hard-won victory. To her, this wasn't just part of her job, it was proof of her instincts and authority. Beneath her professional facade, her deep-rooted prejudice masqueraded as protecting the bank from potential threats. Travis and Amanda led Jayden toward the exit, his steps unsteady, head bowed in despair and shame, his small frame shackled. Tears streamed down his cheeks onto the cold white tile, each drop echoing the turmoil within him. Only the sound of footsteps and the clinking handcuffs broke the dreadful silence. Outside the bank, curious onlookers lined the sidewalk, dozens of faces watching in stunned silence as Jayden passed by, nobody speaking up, nobody intervening, as if they too assumed he must be guilty. The late-day sun had faded into a leaden sky, mirroring the young boy's hopelessness. When Travis and Amanda guided Jayden into the waiting squad car, his world seemed to collapse. Only one anguished question echoed in his mind. Why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve this cruel, humiliating treatment? The police car drove off, leaving behind a silent crowd dispersing in guilt-tinged resignation. Karen turned back into the bank, her cold smile fading, unaware that her hasty, heartless decision would set in motion the downfall of everything she'd built in her life. The police car had just disappeared around the corner, leaving First National Bank under an oppressive, heavy silence. Jayden sat trembling in the back seat, his hands still cuffed behind him, his throat tight with fear. But in that moment of deepest despair, he remembered one last chance, his cell phone buried in the inside pocket of his jacket. Driven by desperation, Jayden carefully twisted in his seat to avoid drawing the officer's attention. In the narrow jacket pocket, his phone lay on silent mode, each second stretching unbearably slow. Jayden's fingers, shaking violently, fumbled through the pocket and finally brushed the screen. He could only pray he wouldn't press the wrong place and ruin his only shot. He glanced up, heart pounding, to see Officer Travis focused on driving and Officer Amanda concentrating on the road, neither suspecting his tiny movements. Seizing the rare opportunity, Jayden bent lower into the seatback, hiding his hands as best he could, breaths coming in ragged gasps, his heart pounding like a drum. He knew there wasn't a moment to lose. All he could picture was his father, the one person he trusted completely. Jayden's trembling thumb unlocked the messaging app. Tears blurred his vision as he typed, "Dad, I'm at First National Bank. They're accusing me of stealing money and calling the police. I'm scared." He hit send with all his remaining strength. No sooner had the delivered notification appeared than the squad car jolted to a stop at a red light, throwing Jayden off balance and exposing his furtive action. Amanda turned sharply. "Hey, what are you doing back there?" she barked, suspicion in her voice. Before Jayden could reply, Travis pulled the car over to the curb. They both exited and strode to his door. Travis yanked it open and demanded icily, "Where did you get that phone? Who said you could use it?" Jayden panicked, tears falling again as he stammered, I was trying to call my dad." "I haven't done anything wrong. Please, let me call him, please." Travis showed no mercy. He snatched the phone from Jayden's hand and glared at the screen, clearly annoyed at the message he saw. "Great, you just sent a help request. Wonderful." Amanda shrugged coldly. "It's out now. Let's just do our job. A kid's message won't change a thing." Jayden sat in the car, utterly crushed, yet a faint spark remained in his heart. Hope that his father had seen the text and would come to rescue him from this nightmare. Meanwhile, back at First National, Karen Mitchell realized she'd made a grave mistake by not checking the phone she'd ripped from Jayden. Her own phone sat on her desk, still powered on because she'd forgotten to turn it off. She grabbed it and whitered at the sight of the sent message. For the first time, unease crept into her mind. Had her hasty, biased decision been wrong? Karen powered the phone down, struggling to steady herself, but a tiny voice in her head whispered doubt. Had she let prejudice override her judgment? Yet pride and stubbornness quickly drowned out that fleeting worry. In her mind, no child like Jayden, black, alone, and acting suspiciously, could possibly be innocent. She resolved to ignore her doubts, convinced everything would end just fine. But Karen had no idea that Jayden's desperate text would ignite a fierce chain reaction, threatening everything she'd worked so hard to protect. And the man who'd just received that urgent message, Michael Bennett, Jayden's father, was not someone to be taken lightly when his son was treated so unjustly. At the same moment, in a majestic skyscraper rising from the heart of the city, the headquarters of the renowned Bennett Group, Dr. Michael Bennett was presiding over a critical meeting with his top strategic partners. The boardroom was sleek and modern, its floor-to-ceiling glass walls flooding the space with natural light. Beyond the windows, the city's high-rises and bustling streets lent an air of gravity and professionalism to the proceedings. Seated at the head of the table, Michael wore his signature calm expression, his voice steady and confident. He was known not only for his leadership acumen, but also for his remarkable emotional control. Today's attendees were heavyweights in the financial world, representatives of prestigious investment funds and major corporations, gathered to discuss a merger valued in the billions. Midway through the solemn, focused discussion, Michael's personal phone, resting beside his stack of documents, vibrated softly. He rarely allowed distractions during such high-stakes meetings, but this time a strange impulse made him glance at the screen. The sender's name appeared clearly: Jayden. A sudden, heavy unease washed over him as he opened the message. His eyes darted over these urgent words. "Dad, I'm at First National Bank. They're accusing me of stealing money and calling the police. I'm really scared." In that instant, the room seemed to go silent. Every murmur faded away. His heart pounded violently in his chest, a mix of panic and rage surging through him. The composed, icy demeanor he wore like a shield shattered. First shock, then an almost terrifying fury. His gaze turned steely, eyes so cold they could pierce steel. His colleagues immediately sensed the shift. Conversation halted as worried looks were cast his way. Everyone knew Michael Bennett as the embodiment of unflappable composure. So, for him to react like this meant something truly dire had occurred. Without a word of explanation, Michael rose to his feet, eyes never leaving the phone screen, his face as rigid as stone. His voice cut through the room with chilling finality. "Meeting adjourned. We'll resume later." The room was stunned into silence. Jonathan Hart, the longest-standing partner at the table, stood up anxiously. "Michael, are you all right? What's so urgent?" Michael didn't answer immediately. His eyes darkened with barely contained anger as he rubbed his temple, as if steadying himself. Then, in a tone so calm it was almost shocking, he said, "My son is in serious trouble. I have to go. Thank you for your understanding." No one dared press him further. They all knew Michael placed family above all else, especially his only son, whom he loved and was proud of more than anything. Cradling his phone, he strode from the room, each measured footstep echoing off the polished wood floor, leaving an eerie hush in his wake. Moments later, Michael was on his private line to his personal assistant, Samuel Green, always on call for matters just like this. Samuel answered on the first ring. "Yes, Mr. Bennett?" Michael's voice was crisp, decisive. "Samuel, contact attorney Daniel Cooper and head of security Brian Scott immediately. Tell them to meet me in the lobby in 5 minutes. I need my car ready to go now." "Right away, sir," Samuel replied without hesitation. Michael stepped into the executive elevator and pressed the ground floor button. In the cramped, mirrored cabin, he stared once more at Jayden's text. His heart ached for his son. Alone, terrified, and facing baseless accusations solely because of his skin color. He blamed himself. A powerful, respected man who couldn't shield his boy from the prejudices and injustices still lurking in society. That simmering anger and heartbreak now ignited a fierce resolve. No moment could be wasted. The elevator doors slid open, and Michael emerged into the grand lobby. Samuel stood waiting, flanked by Daniel Cooper, a famously sharp-minded attorney, and Brian Scott, his veteran head of personal security and former police captain. Their faces were grim, awaiting orders. Without preamble, Michael spoke. "My son is being unlawfully detained at First National Bank. We're leaving immediately. I want a full report on every detail within the next hour. No one is to harm my son, or there will be consequences." His words carried an unspoken warning. When Michael Bennett spoke like that, with ice in his tone and fire in his eyes, anyone responsible or involved would soon face the fallout. And this time, First National Bank, and especially Karen Mitchell, who set all of this in motion, could not possibly imagine the storm about to descend upon them. The sleek, black luxury sedan bearing the license plate BG001 came to a stop in front of the First National Bank, instantly turning the hushed atmosphere into something unbearably tense. This was no ordinary car. BG001 stood for Bennett Group 1, reserved exclusively for the chairman of the Bennett Group, Dr. Michael Bennett. Its commanding presence drew every eye. Customers inside the bank, employees, even passers-by all paused, curiosity and an undefinable unease rippling through them. The door opened slowly, and the first man to step out was Brian Scott, head of Dr. Bennett's personal security detail. He was a towering, muscular figure in an impeccably tailored black suit, his gaze cold and unyielding. A veteran police officer with over 20 years of experience and a formidable reputation in security, Brian's arrival signaled that this situation was far from routine. 2 more bodyguards followed, their stern faces scanning every angle with professional precision. Their fluid, synchronized movements betrayed the rigorous training they'd undergone. Finally, the principal figure emerged. Dr. Michael Bennett himself, one of the city's wealthiest and most powerful CEOs. He stepped from the car with a terrifying calm, his tall frame clad in a dark gray tailored suit, a discreet Rolex glinting at his wrist. Michael's hair was shot through with silver, and his piercing eyes made it clear to everyone that this was no mere high-net-worth client here to conduct routine banking business. This was a man of immense authority, a father whose fury could no longer be contained. Each of his footsteps was resolute and confident, yet his gaze burned with cold anger just beneath the surface. From the opposite side of the car, renowned attorney Daniel Cooper descended. Known for his razor-sharp mind and unflappable composure, Daniel's icy demeanor in any courtroom was legendary. Anyone called in by Dr. Bennett understood immediately that he intended to marshal the full force of the law to protect his son. The 4 men, each exuding their own brand of power and icy resolve, strode into the First National Bank as if the whole building belonged to them. Everyone inside froze in place, breath caught in their throats, sensing that a major storm was about to break within these walls. Inside her office, Karen Mitchell was still basking in satisfaction over how smoothly she'd handled the earlier incident. But when she glanced up through the glass partition and saw the imposing group approaching, her heart clenched with dread. Her eyes locked on Michael Bennett's face, and a chill ran down her spine. Though she'd never met him in person, his reputation in the financial world was unparalleled. Karen swallowed hard, an unfamiliar anxiety welling up inside her. Michael advanced directly to the receptionist's desk. His voice, deep and unwavering, carried an unmistakable authority. "I'm Michael Bennett, chairman of the Bennett Group. I need to see your senior manager immediately." The receptionist, trembling, nodded and hastily picked up the phone. Seconds later, Karen emerged from her office, plastering on a forced smile to hide her unease. She approached Michael, striving to project her usual confidence, though her flustered expression betrayed her panic. "Good afternoon, Mr. Bennett. I'm Karen Mitchell, branch manager. How can I assist you today?" Her tone was courteous, but inside she felt utterly unmoored. Michael fixed her with a steely glare, his eyes flashing with barely restrained anger. "I'll be direct. My son, Jayden Bennett, was unjustly detained here by your bank and had the police called on him simply for carrying legally obtained cash to open an account. I demand an immediate explanation, and you'd better have one that satisfies me, because your career and this bank's reputation depend on it." Every word he spoke hit Karen like a blow. Her head spun with fear and confusion. She inhaled deeply, forcing herself to remain calm as she began to respond. "Sir, I'm very sorry you feel this way, but our security protocols required us to act when your son couldn't clearly explain the large sum of cash he brought in." Before she could finish, Michael cut her off with a voice sharp as a blade. "Don't lie to me, Karen Mitchell. I know my son, and I know that money was entirely legitimate. If you don't resolve this quickly, I will take this matter public, and you will face consequences beyond your worst imaginings." Karen shivered at the sheer force of his cold, authoritative tone. In that moment, she realized just how grievously she had erred. A mistake that could utterly destroy everything she had worked so hard to build. The bank's interior air grew suffocating, each corner thick with tension and drama. Every person present, from customers to staff, even Lisa Edwards huddled off to the side, understood they were witnessing a gathering storm of power. And at its eye stood Karen Mitchell, her once unshakable authority now teetering on the brink. Michael's sharp, commanding words cut deep into Karen's once solid confidence. Yet she fought to maintain her arrogant facade, clinging to her pride as it slipped away. In her eyes flickered a mixture of defiance and contempt. A woman used to running the bank with authoritarian power, believing her words to be absolute. Deep down, she never imagined she would have to face someone capable of threatening her position so gravely. Karen drew a slow breath, looking at Michael with haughty resolve. "Mr. Bennett, I understand you're angry. However, please know that we have very strict procedures in place to ensure the safety of our customers in the bank. A large sum of cash in a child's hands is clearly suspicious. I was only doing my duty." Her voice rang out confidently, as though she was certain every word would force him to back down, but she had gravely underestimated the man standing before her. Michael fixed her with a withering gaze, his eyes like bottomless abysses of cold, barely restrained fury. When he spoke, his calm voice carried a terrible weight that silenced the entire room. "Ms. Mitchell, let me make this perfectly clear. I did not come here as an ordinary customer. I am Michael Bennett, the CEO and majority owner of the Bennett Group, the largest shareholder and principal owner of First National Bank. Every decision and action you took today directly impacts me, my son, and the reputation of this bank." His words were like shards of ice dropped onto calm water, sending invisible but powerful ripples straight at Karen's pride. Her expression shifted from arrogant composure to stunned disbelief, then drained to ashen realization. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her gaze lost all haughty assurance. In that moment, Karen truly felt fear, a frigid dread coursing through her as she realized this man was not just a wealthy client, but the bank's actual owner, holding the fate of her career and life in his hand. Michael continued, allowing her no relief. "My son, Jayden Bennett, is not just any child. He is honest, well-behaved, and understands the value of money. That $800 was entirely legitimate, a birthday gift from his grandmother and his own savings. But you, Ms. Mitchell, you disregarded, insulted, and humiliated him solely because of your blind prejudice. Your actions today were not a minor misunderstanding, but a clear demonstration of vile, toxic discrimination." Karen tried to stammer a defense, her voice weak and trembling. "Mr. Bennett, I truly didn't know he was your son. I only thought—" Michael cut her off coldly, his resolve palpable. "It's not about whether you knew he was my son. It's about choosing prejudice over truth. You chose to hurt and demean a child because you believed you had the authority to do so, and now you will face the consequences of that choice." The air around them thickened. Everyone in the bank felt the invisible pressure bearing down. They understood that Karen Mitchell's career and her life hung by a thread. The staff who once deferred to her now watched with astonishment mixed with a touch of satisfaction at seeing her finally brought low. Karen stood frozen, her body rigid, mind reeling as if the ground had collapsed beneath her. She had never imagined herself in such a powerless position. The woman who'd always believed she held absolute authority now faced the stark truth that she had committed the gravest error of her career. Michael stared at her a moment longer, then turned to his attorney, Daniel Cooper, ever composed. "Daniel, begin the internal investigation immediately. I want every piece of security footage reviewed, and I want to know exactly who was involved in today's incident." Daniel nodded without hesitation. "Right away, Mr. Bennett." Michael then addressed his head of security, Brian Scott. "Brian, ensure all relevant evidence and documentation are collected meticulously. I want every individual responsible to be held accountable." Brian confirmed firmly. "Yes, Mr. Bennett." Finally, Michael looked back at Karen, his voice icy as steel. "And you, Karen Mitchell, prepare to face severe consequences for your actions. I guarantee you will never have the opportunity to repeat such a shameful mistake." Karen remained silent, trembling uncontrollably. In Michael's unyielding gaze, she saw that this was no empty threat. Everything she'd once prided herself on and built over her career stood on the brink of destruction, all because of one arrogant, prejudiced decision she never imagined would cost her so dearly. No sooner had Michael's cold, decisive words fallen than a terrifying silence enveloped the entire bank. Everyone present, from customers to staff, felt as if they'd just witnessed a storm of authority sweep away every ounce of Karen Mitchell's former confidence and arrogance. Standing amid that charged atmosphere, Karen felt her heart tighten, each beat thudding heavily in her ears, heralding a fate she dared not imagine. Michael turned to his attorney, Daniel Cooper, his gaze still unsoftened by emotion. His voice dropped to a low, unmistakable authority, each word weighted with absolute finality. "Daniel, call Chairman Richard Morrison immediately. I need him here without delay. We must review all security footage from the bank. I want no one to be able to distort the truth." Daniel nodded at once, smoothly retrieving his phone and placing the call with astonishing professionalism and calm. Minutes later, Richard Morrison, the esteemed, dignified chairman of First National Bank, renowned for his unwavering commitment to transparency and ethics, rushed into the bank, his face etched with concern and unease. Having learned of the emergency call from Daniel Cooper, Bennett Group's counsel, he knew the situation had to be grave. Stepping into the lobby, Richard could instantly sense the heavy tension in the air. Seeing Michael Bennett standing there, his expression icy, Richard understood that this matter struck directly at the heart of the bank's integrity. Michael quickly greeted him with a firm handshake, his tone controlled yet seething beneath the surface. "Chairman Morrison, I'm sorry to trouble you under such circumstances, but this is urgent. I want to review the security footage to see exactly what happened to my son, Jayden Bennett. I need you to witness the truth yourself." Richard nodded without hesitation. "Of course. We'll get to the bottom of this right away. If there's been any wrongdoing, those responsible will be held accountable." With that, Richard summoned the head of the bank's security department, Mark Roberts, to bring up the surveillance system on the large monitor in the operations room. Everyone, Michael Bennett, Richard Morrison, Daniel Cooper, Brian Scott, and Karen Mitchell among them, gathered to watch. The first images appeared, crystal clear. There was Jayden, entering the bank with a bright smile, excitement shining in his eyes as he carefully held the envelope of his birthday money. Moments later, Lisa Edwards' demeanor shifted strangely upon seeing him. The room watched Lisa furrow her brow, her voice dripping with cruelty as she falsely accused Jayden of illicitly obtaining the cash. But the apex of shock and outrage came when Karen Mitchell appeared on screen. From the very first frame, her gaze was full of disdain and prejudice. She brusquely refused to look at Jayden's legitimate documents, scoffed maliciously, and then snatched his phone in a violent gesture, sending the boy to the brink of tears. Karen's insulting words were captured in their entirety, every harsh syllable undeniable. The bank fell silent as the viewers witnessed Officers Travis Walsh and Amanda Cruz arrive, ignore Jayden's documentation, and immediately handcuff the innocent 13-year-old before everyone's eyes. The replay of these heartbreaking events left those watching stunned, outraged, and deeply pained. Michael Bennett stood motionless, fists clenched in fury. All around, witnesses shared his shock and indignation, but Karen Mitchell's face had gone deathly pale, her body trembling as she realized her career and her life were on the verge of collapse. Richard Morrison stood frozen, anger flushing his face. A man who prided himself on the bank's ethical standards, he was horrified and ashamed by what he'd seen. Turning to Karen, his voice ice-cold yet trembling with disappointment, he said, "Ms. Mitchell, I never imagined you could behave this way. This is a grievous insult to a customer and, worse, an unacceptable act of racial discrimination. I will not tolerate any serious violation of our core principles." Karen trembled, opening her mouth to defend herself but unable to utter a word. All her former arrogance and authority had vanished. She knew she had destroyed everything she once cherished. Michael Bennett, voice now cold and unyielding, turned to Richard Morrison. "I demand immediate action against Karen Mitchell and everyone involved in this incident. I will not accept any tolerance or cover-up of discriminatory behavior in a bank I own." Richard nodded firmly. "Mr. Bennett, I assure you this will be handled decisively. I will suspend Karen Mitchell and Lisa Edwards immediately and conduct a full investigation to ensure justice is carried out swiftly and fairly." Those words struck Karen like a thunderbolt. Tears streamed down her face as she realized, perhaps for the first time, the utter ruin that her own arrogance and prejudice had wrought. Outside, dusk was settling, but inside the bank, this was just the beginning of a far fiercer storm about to break over those who had committed such a grave wrongdoing today. Immediately after Chairman Richard Morrison's decisive declaration, a chilling silence fell over the entire First National Bank. Every pair of eyes, employees and customers alike, turned toward Karen Mitchell, once a figure of unassailable power, now frozen in place with a deathly pallor and eyes wide with panic and despair. The brilliant career she'd spent over 2 decades building had evaporated in an instant. Chairman Morrison pivoted to face the bank, his gaze stern, his voice ringing like ice throughout the lobby. "Karen Mitchell, I hereby terminate your employment effective immediately. From this moment on, you are permanently barred from entering any First National Bank branch. Your conduct today stands in direct opposition to our core values, and I will never allow such behavior in an organization under my leadership." Each word Morrison spoke was like a dagger to Karen's heart. Her legs quivered uncontrollably as she looked around, searching vainly for a sympathetic glance, only to meet cold indifference, disdain, and disappointed headshakes from people who once held her in high esteem. No one dared speak up in her defense, no one could deny the necessity and correctness of the chairman's decision. In that moment, Karen felt the crushing solitude and despair she never imagined she would face. All the power, status, and prestige she once took for granted had collapsed under the weight of her own prejudice and arrogance. The very traits she had always counted as strengths had become the downfall of her life's work. As Karen stood motionless in the center of the bank, phones began buzzing in the hands of onlookers. News of the scandal at First National spread like wildfire across social media and the headlines. Within the hour, Karen Mitchell's name and likeness were plastered all over the news, a sensational topic that rocked the public consciousness. Security camera clips showing Karen's aggressive, racially charged treatment of Jayden Bennett and Lisa Edwards' collusion were shared openly online and by major news outlets, racking up millions of views and shares mere hours after posting. The online community erupted in condemnation. Karen was branded a racist, a cruel authoritarian, and subjected to even harsher epithets. Civil rights groups, human rights activists, and prominent figures added their voices, demanding that the bank impose swift, transparent penalties. Karen's reputation and personal standing were obliterated almost overnight. There remained not a trace of respect for the once admired woman who had wielded such influence. Meanwhile, Karen was gripped by utter terror, her body trembling uncontrollably. She staggered out of the bank, trying to avoid the contemptuous stares and whispered gossip of passers-by. But outside, she was immediately surrounded by reporters and curious onlookers, their cameras flashing as they hurled demanding questions. "Ms. Mitchell, do you regret your racist actions? How will you explain insulting an innocent child? Do you think you deserve to be fired and condemned like this?" Karen could utter no response. She covered her face with trembling hands and pushed desperately through the throng toward her car. But even her loyal driver turned away from her pleading eyes as if she were a stranger. The sense of abandonment and isolation was absolute. In the days that followed, Karen's life became a living nightmare. Not only had she lost her job, but multiple organizations and regulatory bodies launched investigations into her discriminatory conduct. No other financial institution would consider employing her. Her phone rang incessantly with angry, threatening calls from strangers. Reporters and gawkers besieged her home, leaving her in a perpetual state of fear. In an astonishingly short time, the illustrious career that Karen had regarded as her greatest achievement was erased entirely. The 20-plus years of painstaking effort collapsed beneath her feet. Karen Mitchell went from a figure of commanding authority to the epitome of abject failure, a woman who once stood at the pinnacle of power, only to be plunged into ruin by her own arrogance and prejudice. Sitting alone in her darkened home, Karen finally faced her mistakes head-on. She realized that the disastrous consequences she now endured were the inevitable result of her own bigotry, discriminatory actions, and brutal lack of empathy. She understood too late that she could never return to her former life, and that this stain would follow her for the rest of her days. Outside, the world continued to talk, condemn, and replay the scandal as a sobering lesson to anyone clinging to baseless prejudice. And Karen Mitchell, now an object of universal scorn, became a stark reminder that those who elevate themselves above others through arrogance and bias ultimately set the stage for their own downfall. While Karen Mitchell's career and reputation were sinking into the abyss, the fallout from this incident didn't stop there. A powerful wave of public outrage spread rapidly, not only targeting Karen herself, but also focusing on the two officers, Travis Walsh and Amanda Cruz, who had unjustly and improperly arrested Jayden. The media frenzy, public pressure, and Michael Bennett's authoritative voice forced the local police department to launch an immediate, transparent, and serious investigation. Security camera footage from the bank was replayed on every news outlet, clearly showing Travis Walsh and Amanda Cruz coldly and forcefully handcuffing Jayden without conducting any kind of verification. The image of a terrified 13-year-old child in handcuffs became a shocking symbol that ignited deep anger in both the community and the press. People demanded to know, why had these officers so readily believed Karen's baseless accusations and completely ignored Jayden's clear evidence? Under mounting public pressure, Police Chief Robert Phillips announced the emergency suspension of Travis Walsh and Amanda Cruz, pending the internal investigation. Speaking at a nationally televised press conference, Chief Phillips, his expression grave, declared, "We will never tolerate abuse of power, prejudice, or discrimination within our ranks. This regrettable incident forces us to confront serious gaps in our system. I pledge that this internal review will be fair, transparent, and that those responsible will face legal accountability." Immediately, the department's Internal Affairs Unit reviewed every detail of the officers' conduct. Their investigation swiftly revealed severe violations. Walsh and Cruz had skipped the most basic step of verifying Jayden's identification and financial documents, opting instead to take at face value the prejudiced claims of a private citizen. When summoned before the review board, both officers admitted acting hastily and influenced by personal bias, offering unconvincing excuses like work pressure and an instinctive suspicion. Ultimately, Travis Walsh and Amanda Cruz were placed on long-term suspension and mandated to undergo anti-bias training and lawful procedure retraining. Images of the two formerly proud officers, heads bowed in remorse as they exited the police headquarters, became a potent warning nationwide. Prejudice-driven policing carries severe consequences. This scandal prompted a sweeping, unprecedented reform within the local police department. New, stringent policies on evidence verification, document checks, and citizens' rights before any arrest were enacted. All officers were required to complete extensive human rights, anti-racial discrimination, and juvenile interactions training. Chief Phillips hailed these changes as a critical turning point, ensuring nothing like this would ever happen again. Meanwhile, at First National Bank, the severity of the incident forced Chairman Richard Morrison to initiate the most comprehensive cultural overhaul in the bank's history. With Michael Bennett's strong support, the bank rolled out a deep reform program focused on corporate culture and customer service. Emergency internal training sessions were held for every employee, emphasizing cultural awareness, anti-bias principles, and respectful service for all clientele. Staff were required to pledge strict adherence to the new policies, particularly when serving minors and other vulnerable groups. Chairman Morrison personally signed a new customer service code of conduct, establishing clear, stringent standards for interacting with customers under 18, polite demeanor, respect, and transparent document verification processes. Every First National branch nationwide was instructed to publicly display customers' rights and responsibilities to ensure maximum fairness and respect. In a short time, these bold reforms by both the police department and First National Bank earned widespread praise from the public and advocacy groups. Although the incident's repercussions were profound, the community saw positive signals that grave mistakes can serve as catalysts for meaningful change, fostering deeper awareness of equality and human rights. As for Karen Mitchell, she never re-emerged in the public eye, but her name became a stark, cautionary tale of the disastrous consequences of prejudice and arrogance. Meanwhile, both the banking and law enforcement systems, compelled to confront their own failures, began rebuilding public trust through genuine, far-reaching, and sustainable reforms. After the tremendous and painful ordeal the Bennett family had just endured, Michael knew it was time for a serious, heartfelt conversation with his son, Jayden. Late one evening, as the warm golden light cast soft shadows across their elegant yet modest living room, Michael quietly sat down beside Jayden and placed a steady hand on his shoulder. His tone, equal parts comforting and solemn. Jayden sat in silence for a long moment, his thoughtful eyes fixed on the distant view outside the window. The events he'd just experienced had left wounds in his young heart that were slow to heal. For the first time in his 13 years, he'd been forced to confront the harsh reality of racial discrimination, a reality he'd only heard about in stories or read about in books. Now, it was more vivid than ever, imprinting itself on his sensitive but youthful mind. Breaking the hush that filled the room, Michael spoke softly. "Son, I know what happened was painful and difficult for you. But I want you to understand that it's through hardships like these that we truly grow stronger. The truth is, this world isn't perfect. It's full of prejudice and injustice that can sometimes be cruel. Our job is to never back down in the face of that." Jayden turned to look at his father. A spark of resolve glimmered in his eyes, though his voice still trembled with lingering hurt. "Dad," he said, "I never thought carrying my own savings would make people suspect me of wrongdoing. Why is it so easy for them to assume I was guilty just because of my skin color? It's not fair." Michael met his son's gaze with love and seriousness intertwined. "I understand how you feel, Jayden. That's what we call prejudice. A dangerous thing because it leads people to judge others based solely on appearance or race, ignoring the real value inside each person. People like Karen Mitchell or those officers acted out of a false sense of power rooted in ignorance and fear. That's why our responsibility is to use the true power, knowledge, respect, and fairness to stand up against such injustice." Jayden thought deeply about his father's words, then nodded with determination. "I get it, Dad. I don't want to stay silent or shy away from this anymore. I want to do something to change this reality, so kids my age won't have to go through what I did." Michael smiled with pride and gave Jayden's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear, Jayden. The power we have, the opportunities we hold, they mean nothing if we don't use them to protect those who are weaker than us, to build a fairer, better society." In the days that followed, the Bennett family took decisive, practical action. Michael and his wife, Amanda Bennett, announced the creation of the Equal Rights Initiative, a foundation dedicated to funding and promoting financial education and anti-racism programs, especially for children and teens of color. With the Bennett's substantial resources and broad influence, the initiative immediately garnered strong support from the community and various social organizations. Perhaps the most remarkable development, however, was Jayden's decision to serve as the initiative's official spokesperson. Though only 13, he had matured remarkably. He understood that his personal story was a powerful testament to the urgent need to shift societal attitudes about discrimination and false prejudice. Over the next few months, Jayden appeared at community events, schools, nonprofits, and major education and human rights conferences. Each time he spoke, he shared his story with sincerity, emotional depth, and unwavering conviction. His account of an innocent boy treated unfairly because of his skin color quickly resonated, touching millions of hearts. The media soon took notice of Jayden, but this time not for scandal. Instead, they celebrated the positive, hopeful message he carried. Jayden had transformed his painful experience into a force for change, becoming a vital voice in the fight against racial discrimination. Thousands of letters, messages, and emails poured in from around the world, expressing empathy, support, and gratitude for his courage. Under Jayden's leadership, the Equal Rights Initiative flourished. Programs teaching financial literacy, life skills, anti-discrimination awareness, and confidence building were rolled out nationwide. Schools in underserved communities and countless young people of color benefited greatly from these efforts. First National Bank also pledged long-term support for the initiative, viewing it as a way to atone for its past mistakes and reaffirm its commitment to social responsibility. Chairman Morrison personally met with Jayden to offer a heartfelt apology and profound admiration for the boy's strength and resolve. Looking back, Michael realized that although the events had been deeply painful and traumatic, they had sparked his son's extraordinary growth. Jayden had learned the most important lessons about real power and responsibility. Now, Jayden was no longer just a wounded 13-year-old. He had become a confident young leader determined to use his story to sow seeds of hope and build a better future. A future where skin color, background, or circumstances would no longer justify injustice or discrimination. Jayden Bennett's journey reminds us of the severe harm prejudice and racism can cause, but it also stands as proof of the transformative power of courage, perseverance, and hope for a more just world. What do you think about Jayden's actions and the positive changes his family has brought to the community? If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe so we can continue bringing you more inspiring content. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.